Welcome back to the Bioactive podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Kirk. I was planning on uploading an episode today on cannabis suppositories, what suppositories are good for, what do they do, etc., etc. But then I thought, you know what? One, that's not festive enough. And two, I don't think we take the chance to reflect enough. So I want to take this opportunity to reflect on the year. So I want to talk about some of my reflections, not just from growing plants, including cannabis and other plants, but also some of the literature or publications that were published this year that really expanded our knowledge on cannabis, cannabinoids, and cannabis medicine. So let's dive into it. This is going to be a little bit of an abbreviated episode, a little bit more chill. And I hope you enjoy it. I also hope that you're relaxed, that you're session on something that you enjoy. At the end of every year, it's hard not to think about it, but you just don't know what the next year is going to bring, positives, negatives, whatever it is. So I think it's really important that we just focus on some of the positives that happen throughout the year so we can bring in those lessons to the next year and really appreciate the different people in our lives that have brought us to the point of where we are today. Some of my favorite advances in the weed science world were, of course, I'm going to mention some aroma papers. So the first aroma paper that I think that was really amazing was with Twinkle Periani, who was on this podcast as a guest, talking about identifying the compounds for the first time ever in cannabis that give that super dank, cheesy smell, that really rich, cheesy smell, which doesn't smell like terpenes because it's not due to terpenes. It's actually due to these fatty acid molecules or these super fatty molecules, which we typically don't pay any attention to fatty molecules except for cannabinoids. Fatty molecules are more difficult to study in general, but also they get kind of lost in the cleanup process a lot. So I know that research was really difficult, and it's pretty amazing to finally be able to have a chemical marker to identify these unique chemical varieties or chemotypes of cannabis that produce those cheesy smells. And of course, the next step is, what does it do in the body, these cheesy molecules? But something that I was talking to Twinkle about at MJ Biz in Vegas, which is the largest cannabis conference, is she was kind of like, yeah, everyone wants to know what all of these new molecules do, and we want to know that too. But also, that's not the way science works. Science works in a very piecewise manner. Everybody's just adding pieces to that puzzle, and oftentimes, especially in this industry, we don't take the time to be like, wow, what an amazing discovery, great job, pat on the back, you should be so proud of that. Everyone's like, okay, well, what does it do? Now what? Tell me more. And I get that as the natural reaction, but I think at this moment we have to take a second and say, wow, we've discovered some really cool chemistry in the past couple of years. We just learned about flavorants in general over the past, I think 2023, it was published for the first time that there's these non-terpene smells in cannabis that contribute to the depth of aroma. And Abstracts Tech is really the people who are pioneering this research, which is amazing. So another thing Twinkle identified in the same paper that they were identifying those cheesy aromas was a new molecule called 3-mercaptahexyl hexoinate, or 3-MHH, which provides that really tropical and citrusy aroma. So this might not mean a lot to people who don't consume cannabis, but if you smell that aroma sometimes and it almost smells like papayas on a beach blended with coconut, that type of really strong tropical flavor is really where these flavorants shine, as well as those really dank, gassy or skunky aromas. For all of my anxious friends out there, we learned a lot about cannabis and anxiety. Now, we already know a bit about cannabis and anxiety, but these two publications that I'm going to talk about kind of expanded our knowledge in new ways. So just as a recap, THC gives a lot of people anxiety. It exemplifies what we call a biphasic response, which means at low doses, it is anti-anxiety, but at high doses, it can be pro-anxiety. It can actually generate anxiety, right? And different people have different thresholds of this. Some people are just more anxious in general. Tolerance definitely plays a role in this. I have, actually, my husband was asking me about this last night, just being like, why am I so affected by anxiety, but you can smoke, so much? And part of that, of course, is being less of an anxious person, but having a tolerance to cannabis too, being familiar with what the effects are, and being able to titrate your dose appropriately, I think are also huge parts of that equation that we need to take into account. And tolerance, I mean, when you build tolerance, you literally have less available cannabinoid receptors in your brain, meaning the THC has less spots to bind to, so you're going to get less of a reaction, so it's not going to be as overwhelming. So someone who's more naive and newer to cannabis, that THC is going to hit them really hard. They have all of those cannabinoid receptors, open and willing in their brain, and have no developed tolerance and may not have any idea what being high feels like, which can be anxiety inducing. You're also, opening up those neural pathways. You are thinking in different ways, and those different ways aren't always, a calming experience. So that's just some background. But two of the papers that I want to talk about that were published this year, one is titled Vaporized D-limonene Selectively Mitigates the Acute Anxiogenic Effects of Delta-9 THC in Healthy Adults Who Intermittently Use Cannabis. It's a long title. But essentially it's saying if you vape weed that has the terpene limonene in it, this can help counteract some of those anxiety-inducing effects from THC. So this is really important for the people who love their sativas specifically. I'm one of these people. Sativas often are characterized, terpinolene is like that signature terpene that you're looking for. But you also see things like, other smelly compounds like pinene or limonene present. And terpinolene and pinene can sometimes cause people to be a bit more anxious. But I'm reading these studies saying, okay, if those kind of upper sativa types typically make you feel a little bit anxious, but you still want that locked in daytime feel, look for that balance of terpinolene with limonene. And if you really want to balance it out, some of the more sedating terps like myrcene or caryophyllene, which can really help balance out those kind of anxiety-inducing effects. Also, calming terpenes in general, like linalool, can help reduce anxiety too. But I think that this new paper, we had a lot of anecdotal data that limonene can help people with anxiety, but I think this paper is really compelling. The second anxiety paper that I want to talk about that was published in 2024 is titled Acute Effects of Cannabigerol on Anxiety, Stress, and Mood, a double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover field trial. And the main takeaway from the study was relative to the placebo group, there was a significant main effect on CBG on the overall reduction of anxiety and stress. So again, if you're looking for those more daytime effects, but you want to stay away from THC because maybe you don't want to feel kind of like you're in a fog. A lot of people feel like things are just kind of blurry when they're consuming THC during the day. They like it more of as like a nighttime relaxing. Using a CBG product can provide that more stimulating, locked in feeling, but you don't have those anxiety generating effects from THC. Instead, this paper is suggesting that the CBG can help you balance out that anxiety. And actually, our nonprofit has an additional study on CBG for anxiety, which is a case study during COVID, during lockdown. So I love to see that this data is really piling up of using CBG either in conjunction with THC or just CBG on its own. Reminder to listeners that you can buy CBG flower, you can buy CBG tinctures, you can buy CBG hash, you can buy CBG isolate. Like there's so many different ways to consume cannabigerol. And because many of these products contain little to no THC, many of them you can purchase online. Tinctures are my favorite way to consume CBG. I'm actually using Trusted Canna Nurse's CBG tincture now, so check out her company if you're interested in that. I really like seeing a lot more attention come to cannabichromene or CBC. We have a lot of interesting data that CBC is a good pain treatment alternative. Again, this is not medical advice, just some previous research on it, and newer research is showing that CBC and THC likely have this synergistic activity, so they work best for pain in combination. And CBC won't make you feel high, but still can provide some of those pain relieving properties in a different mechanism that THC offers. So THC's mechanism on reducing pain or pain signaling is really acting through those cannabinoid 1 receptors and suppressing the amount of pain signals that are reaching your brain. CBC is working more towards the inflammatory pathway. So specifically with conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory gut conditions, the combination of CBC and THC looks really promising. And I'm really hoping to see more research come out on CBC, especially with relevant doses and product types. I want to see more of that. I know Wana Brands is working on a gummy with CBC and THC, so I'm excited to see that come out. And we also had a paper published on CBC's metabolism in the body. And to me, that means that we're getting more of that research because these compounds are getting more popular. So CBC is often, I think, referred to as a minor cannabinoid, but it's really more of a major cannabinoid. There are some varieties that have pretty appreciable amounts of CBC. I think we just need to start breeding for that more again, because we kind of lost that in the THC craze over the past few years. We did learn more about CHS, or cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. This is a condition that people really don't like to talk about because it's talking about an adverse effect from cannabis consumption. But really what the data I want to share is something that was published this year and was published last year, is that there is very likely a genetic predisposition to developing CHS, meaning not everybody is equally as likely. It's likely just a subset of the population that is already susceptible, and then they're also consuming large amounts of THC, and together those lead to the development of CHS. CHS is a condition that's characterized by these bouts of cyclical vomiting, meaning like you go through bouts where you're vomiting 20, 30 times a day. You end up in the ER because you're so dehydrated. It's extremely painful. And the only things that help are hot pepper cream, capsaicin cream on the stomach, or taking really hot showers because it activates that TRPV1 receptor. I did an episode with Dr. Cody Peterson and Megan Bang. You can listen to that if you want to learn more about CHS. And next year, we will be publishing our study on CHS that we are actually closing today, December 27th. So thank you to anyone who did participate in that. I know it is time consuming. I know it's probably painful to think back on your CHS experiences, but the whole goal with this study is to get quicker diagnoses for our community and ones that are correct. I mean, this is misdiagnosed all the time. People are taking way too many medications before they get help, and we want to make sure that medical professionals are well informed on this condition and know what to do when a CHS case comes into the emergency room or other healthcare facility. There was more cool research to come out too. One of the most exciting topics is looking at sex differences on the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS. Males versus females, are we producing more or less receptors, enzymes, cannabinoids, whatever it is. So I'm having a researcher on in a couple of months who's going to help us understand that a little better. And then the next episode that I'm really, really stoked about is talking about both cannabis and psilocybin containing mushrooms for migraines. You all know that I suffer from migraines. Many of you listening also suffer from migraines, and I feel for you. And there's finally some data coming out about CBD, THC ratios that we should be using, and even a proposed FDA-approved drug that is a ratio of THC and CBD. And I'm going to be talking to one of the lead researchers on that. So he's going to give us some insight on what he's learned as a migraine researcher and how we can implement that into our own lives. So I am so excited for that. I've already had a pre-call with him, and I wish I recorded it because it was amazing. And I think this is the funniest thing, but I only mentioned like 4 or 5 studies here that I really loved in 2024. But maybe the biggest thing that happened this year is the FDA, for the first time, after over 30,000 publications on cannabis, over 4 million medical cannabis patients, 2 FDA-approved drugs. The FDA finally came out and said, you know what? Cannabis might have some medical value. We might reschedule this to a Schedule 3 drug. But nothing's happened yet. So it remains a Schedule 1 drug to this day. And I guess any movement forward is good. But I think we all feel that cannabis should be descheduled rather than rescheduled. But again, forward progress is forward progress. But FDA, you got to say more than that you're going to do something. We want to see change. We want to see action. We want to see people out of prison. And we want to see it now. So hopefully that all comes in 2025. I also want to thank anyone who's been listening to this podcast in 2024. We grew quite a bit this year. This was a top 10 podcast for over 1,500 people on Spotify, which is, I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. I want to read a recent review that I got through the website. And if anybody does have a second while I'm reading this review to give a 5-star review, to subscribe on YouTube, whatever you can do to show your support, it really helps push this podcast to new audiences. And we all know that in cannabis, it's so difficult to reach new audiences. So any help is so appreciated. All right. So it says, I'm going to leave the name out because it's not like a public comment. So, hey, Riley, I would like to thank you for all your information and your non-judgmental, compassionate attitude. I tend to worry about using too much cannabis, but honestly, it is totally enhancing my life. I live a healthy lifestyle except for smoking cannabis, and now you have helped me see that I'm not slowly killing myself. Thank you, and keep up with what you're doing. I'm sure it is helping a lot of people. I love this so much. I know that I get so many messages about people's inherent shame from being a daily cannabis consumer, and you don't need to feel that shame. A lot of that shame is purposeful. You know, a lot of it came from the government and was meant to make you feel like you should not be consuming this plant and you should be spending your money in these other industries like the tobacco, the nicotine, the pharmaceutical industry to help better your lives. But we know that often does not work and is not true. And cannabis has such a unique medicinal benefit, and honestly smoking has a unique medicinal benefit. I get a lot of shit for smoking, and especially smoking online. You know, I just posted an Instagram of me smoking a hash roll with my brothers, and every time I post a smoking picture I lose like almost 100 followers because people think that as a scientist I shouldn't be smoking and I shouldn't be talking positively about smoking. But the one thing that I learned from researching cannabis smoke over the past 5 years is that it is a very unique medicinal concoction and nothing else compares to it. I mean, even vaping, like I vape all the time. I'm usually dry herb vaping on this podcast, but it's not the same as smoking. And, you know, part of that, of course, is the act of rolling up. But you feel it when you take that inhale, you feel a different concoction of molecules entering your body, and that is true. It is a very unique formulation. And again, if you do have adverse effects from smoking, then you shouldn't be smoking. But if you don't have any adverse effects, it's greatly benefiting your life. You feel happy, you feel well medicated, you feel like you have things in control. There's no reason that you are forced to take a tolerance break. There's no reason that you should not be smoking if it is enhancing your life and you don't have adverse effects. But as cannabis consumers, it's just really important for us to touch base with ourselves and make sure that we do still have a positive relationship with the plant. Check in with other community members. You know, oftentimes as cannabis consumers, we don't really trust people as non-cannabis consumers to give us advice on our consumption because people don't understand. But as a cannabis community, I think it's really, really important that we keep each other in check. And if someone is taking a tolerance break, whether that is to lower their tolerance or it's to reevaluate their relationship with cannabis, we need to be okay with that. You know, we need to encourage it for our friends and family because just being able to check in on yourself is a very mature way to handle your medicine. And I think it's one of the best things that we can do as a community. In 2024, actually, I finished the book that I've been writing since last December, and I finally have, this is just a dummy copy, so the whole inside is not filled out, but I have this copy, I'm showing it on YouTube right now, of what the what the cover is going to look like. It's called Reefer Wellness, and it's using the science and the culture of cannabis to help reverse some of the myths and lies that reefer madness caused, and some of those negative stigmas that we give to ourselves and that other people provide on us. This book is to be a reference for our community, so that if you can talk about what conditions cannabis might be good for, the different consumption methods that you can use, and how each consumption method can be used as a tool in your cannabis toolbox. There's so much information in this book. I am so incredibly proud of it, and I am so excited for it to reach your hands. This is actually available for pre-order right now. The book doesn't come out till June, but I'm already promoting it because you just never know what's going to happen with cannabis accounts like this one. If I get deleted, I don't know how I'm going to market this product, but I really think it's like a key resource, especially for new consumers, especially for, your mom who doesn't really understand why you use this plant. Share it with someone in your life, and I think it's going to help change their perspective on this plant. So thank you for all the support that I've gotten writing this. And the last thing that I'm going to touch on is lessons in the garden this year. So as many of you know, I'm a big gardener, not just for weed. I grow hundreds of different plants, medicinal plants, poison plants, edible plants, all of the above. It's a huge part of my life, and honestly why I don't post very much in the summer. But anyway, lessons learned in the garden this year. First, as I mentioned, love smoking sativa-like profiles. But the issue with sativa plants is that they're really airy, and they're tall, and they take a long time to grow. So one of my goals for 2025 is to either A, start my plants sooner so that I'm not fighting against the frost in those last weeks of October, or find some genetics that still provide that super uplifting feel, but mature a lot faster. So if any of the listeners have recommendations, leave them in the comments on YouTube or on the IG post. Comment below there, because I would love the help with all the cultivation connoisseurs. I'm definitely not expert level, but I have a lot of fun, and it's very medicinal for me to grow weed, so I absolutely love it. Other changes in the garden 2025. One, I don't know why I never grow enough dill. Like nowhere near enough dill. And I eat dill like every single day in some sort of like yogurt saucy creation, and I always run out way too early. So next year we're going to have like 40 dill plants on the corner of every garden, and I'm never going to run out. I also use it for canning and pickling like all of my stuff. So way more dill next year. Also found out that raccoons love corn this year. They decimated about 1/3 of our corn plants, which is like 30 plants. So I think next year we may have to actually invest in a fence around our garden. Because this year we got hit pretty hard. Not gonna lie. All right. Well, as I mentioned, this is a short episode. I am so thankful for everyone who's joined me on YouTube, on Patreon, on Spotify and Apple. As I mentioned, I really want this podcast to evolve as the science evolves. So there are a few different researchers that like just published some amazing research that are going to be on the show. And I really hope this can be kind of a standard when new people are publishing cool research in cannabis and other medicinal plants and fungi, that we can get them on the show. You guys can ask them questions, and we can all learn together as a way to just be on top of natural products research and have that connection with the researchers. I also forgot to mention that I'm really big on New Year's resolutions, like maybe a little bit too invested. And I have some for my personal life and some for my weed world. And my weed one for last year, or for this year, 2024, was to try to roll bigger J's, which sounds kind of stupid, but like I'm very good at rolling just a normal sized joint, 0.5 gram to maybe 1 gram, but probably 0.5 gram joints. That's just my go-to quick roll up. But the large king size papers, like rolling large joints, I've never been able to do. So I really wanted to learn. I got pretty good this year. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, but I'd say I could check that comfortably off my list. And into 2025, my New Year's weed resolution is to be better to be excellent at cleaning out my Puffco after I'm done using it. And I know I get bullied all the time because I'm not amazing at cleaning out my Puffco, but I realize the flavors better, I realize the medicine's better, and I realize the experience is better when it's clean. So I'm going to be very, very on top of cleaning up my Puffco every single time. And if you see me with a dirty Puffco, you're allowed to yell at me. All right. After that, signing off. Peace, love, 420. Mad love. See ya in 2025.